If you've ever finished scrolling through a store you didn't need to visit and felt a small ache for something you couldn't name, this is for you. That ache isn't about the object. It never was. And until you understand what it's actually about, no purchase will ever quiet it. Today I want to tell you about a merchant who built the most successful stall in a city famous for its market, and a monk who owned 4 things in the entire world. One day the merchant asked the monk a question he had never dared ask anyone, not his wife, not his priest, not even himself in the mirror at night. The monk's answer was 7 words long. Those 7 words will come. But first you need to understand the market this merchant built his life inside, because it is the same market you're standing in right now, even if you've never called it that. Before we go further, tell me something in the comments. What's the one thing you keep buying, upgrading, or chasing that never actually makes the wanting stop? Not the biggest purchase. The quiet, repeating one. I think you'll find you're not the only one carrying it. The city was called Rasan, and its market was said to have no closing hour. Lamps were lit at dusk so the stalls could keep trading until the last customer went home. And some nights the last customer never came, because there was always one more stall to pass. The merchant's name was Emrah, and his stall sat at the very center of the market, where 4 streets met, so that no matter which direction a person walked, they would pass his goods first. Emrah had begun as nothing. His father sold rope. Emrah remembered as a boy, watching wealthy traders walk past his father's rope stall without slowing, their eyes already fixed on something finer further down the row, and he had promised himself that one day people would slow down for him. He remembered too the specific weight of that promise, how it had settled into his chest at 11 years old and never quite lifted, how it had shaped which streets he chose to walk, which men he chose to greet, which version of himself he presented to the market each morning before the first customer arrived. By the time he was 40, they did slow down for him. His stall held silk from 3 countries, spice tins with wax seals, glass bottles that caught the lamplight and threw it back in colors his father never could have afforded to imagine. Emrah owned 2 homes, 4 horses, and a small library that no one in his family could read, because none of them needed to read. They only needed him to have it. Visitors from other cities were brought to see his stall the way they were brought to see the great fountain in the square, as though he too had become one of the city's fixed attractions, something permanent and impressive that Rasan could point to and say, "This too is ours." And yet Emrah could not sleep. Not most nights, but enough nights. He would close the stall, count the day's earnings twice, lock the coins in the chest his grandfather had made, and lie awake beside his wife listening to the market outside their window. Lamps still burning, voices still bargaining, someone else's stall still open, still selling, still growing. He did not fear poverty. He had long since outrun poverty. What he feared, though he could not have named it then, was the feeling that no matter how full the chest became, some other chest, somewhere, was fuller. He began walking the market at night after closing, just to look, not to buy, just to see what else there was. He told himself, the first few times, that he was checking on competitors, gathering information a serious merchant should have. But he noticed, eventually, that he walked past the stalls of men who sold nothing like what he sold. A coppersmith, a maker of bird cages, a seller of dyed feathers from birds Emrah couldn't name, and still felt the same low pull in his chest, the same quiet calculation of what he had against what still existed to be had. This is where his weakness lives, and it is worth sitting with because it is not a rare weakness. It is the ordinary condition of anyone who has ever felt the tug to check one more listing, scroll one more page, price one more upgrade after the thing they needed was already in hand and already good enough. At the far edge of the market, past the spice rows and the lamp oil sellers, there was a narrow stone courtyard where a monk named Thon had lived for 11 years. He owned a bowl, a robe, a mat, and a small knife for cutting fruit. That was the complete inventory of his life. Merchants sometimes mocked him gently as they passed, not cruelly, but the way a man mocks something he doesn't understand and privately envies a little. Thong never seemed to notice the mockery or the market or the lamps. He simply sat, ate what was offered, and in the evenings watched the sky change color over the rooftops as though it were the only transaction happening in the entire city. But what Emrah didn't know on the first night he wandered near that courtyard was that he wasn't going there by accident. Some part of him had been walking toward that stone courtyard for 11 years without knowing it existed. He stopped outside the low wall one evening, watching Than eat rice from his single bowl with the unhurried attention of someone who had never once in his life wondered whether there might be a better bowl somewhere. Emrah found himself asking, before he had decided to speak at all, "Doesn't it bother you, owning nothing?" Than looked up, unbothered by the question or the hour. "I own 4 things," he said. "That's not nothing. That's enough." Emrah almost laughed. "Enough for what?" And this is where everything began to change, though neither of them knew it yet, because Than simply answered, "Enough to stop looking," and went back to his rice, as if he had said something ordinary rather than something Emrah would carry home like a stone in his coat pocket. Emrah did not sleep that night either, but it was a different kind of sleeplessness. He returned to the courtyard 3 nights later, and then again the week after that, always after the stall closed, always telling himself it was curiosity and nothing more. He began to notice things about Than that unsettled him precisely because they were so unremarkable. Than never checked the courtyard gate to see if someone finer had arrived. He never compared his bowl to the bowls other monks carried when they passed through the city on pilgrimage. He ate the same rice on a good day and a hard day and seemed equally at peace with both. One evening, Emrah brought a gift, a small silver dish, one of the finer pieces from his stall, more valuable than everything in the courtyard combined. He set it down and said, "For your fruit. It's better than the wood one you use." Than looked at the dish for a long moment, long enough that Emrah began to feel foolish standing there. Then Than said gently, "If I take this, tomorrow I will want a knife to match it, and then a mat to match the knife. Where does it end? Remember this detail, because it is the hinge the entire story turns on." Than was not refusing the dish because he disliked beautiful things. He was refusing it because he understood with total clarity that one beautiful thing is never the end of wanting. It is only ever the beginning of wanting something to match it. Emrah took the dish back to his stall that night and could not stop thinking about his own home, the 2 houses, the 4 horses, the library no one read, and how each one had, in its time, created the next want rather than satisfying the one before it. The silk had made him want finer silk. The finer silk had made him want a second home to display it in. The second home had made him want horses fine enough to arrive at it properly. Nothing in the chain had ever been the last link. Every want had simply given birth to the next one, quietly, the way one lamp is lit from another down an endless row of stalls. And this is where everything changed, because Emrah finally asked Than the question he had been circling for weeks without daring to say it directly. He asked it on a night when the market behind him was still fully lit, still fully open, still full of people passing his own unattended stall without him there to greet them for the first time in 20 years. He asked, "How do I want less?" He expected a long answer. He expected a teaching, a practice, a list of disciplines, the kind of thing a man spends years learning. Instead, Than looked at him with something close to tenderness and said 7 words that Emrah would repeat to himself every night for the rest of his life. "You already have what you keep seeking." That was all. No elaboration, no scripture, no formula. Just those 7 words, spoken as plainly as a man remarking on the weather. And then Than returned to his rice as though nothing extraordinary had happened at all, because for him, nothing had. For Emrah, the ground itself seemed to shift. He stood there in the lamplight with his silver dish still in his hand, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he did not want to walk further into the market to see what else there was. Here is what that answer actually means, because it isn't a riddle, and it isn't mysticism dressed up to sound profound. Wanting less is not about owning less, though sometimes it results in that. It's about recognizing that the ache you feel scrolling, comparing, upgrading, checking your balance one more time, hoping the number will finally make you feel safe. That ache was never actually asking for the next thing. It was asking you to notice what you'd already stopped seeing. Emrah didn't lack anything material the night he asked his question. He had 2 houses, 4 horses, silk from 3 countries. What he lacked was the experience of having enough, which is not a threshold you cross with money. It's a decision you make with attention. This is the one idea I want you to sit with today, because trying to hold 2 ideas at once usually means you walk away with neither. Contentment is not the absence of desire. It's the moment you stop treating desire as a message that something is missing, and start recognizing it as a habit your mind repeats regardless of how full your life already is. The merchant who owns nothing and the merchant who owns everything can suffer from the identical hunger, because the hunger was never really about the goods. It was about a mind that had learned very early to measure itself by distance from some imagined finer stall further down the row. If that's true, then wanting less isn't a discipline of denial. It's a discipline of attention. And attention is something you can practice tonight in small, concrete ways without giving anything up. Here's the first step. Tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 things money cannot buy that you already own. Not gratitude in the abstract, but specific things. The quality of your closest friendship. The fact that your body got you through today without you having to think about it. A particular hour of quiet you had this week and nearly missed noticing. Write them by hand if you can. The hand remembers what the eye skims past. Here is the second step. The next time you feel the pull to check one more listing, add one more thing to a cart, price one more upgrade. Pause and ask yourself Than's real question, not, can I afford this, but what am I hoping this will finally settle? Usually the honest answer isn't about the object at all. It's about safety or belonging or proof that you matter. Naming that out loud, even quietly to yourself, drains most of the want's power immediately. Here's the third step. Choose one thing in your life you already own that you have stopped truly seeing because it arrived so long ago it became furniture. Use it, wear it, or look at it tonight as if you were about to lose it tomorrow. This is not superstition. It is retraining a mind that has gotten very good at spotting what's missing and very poor at registering what's already here. None of these 3 steps ask you to want nothing. That would be its own kind of trap, a new performance to fail at, another standard to fall short of at 2 in the morning. Than himself wanted things. Rice over hunger, shade over sun, the particular quiet of that courtyard over noise. Wanting is not the enemy here. The enemy is the specific habit of treating each want as evidence that your current life is insufficient, rather than as a small passing weather system moving across a life that was already whole before it arrived. Picture Than at dusk, the way Emra must have pictured him for years afterward, sitting in that narrow stone courtyard with his bowl, his robe, his mat, and his small knife, watching the sky do something it had never done in quite that combination of colors before, and would never do again. He wasn't waiting for the market to close. He had simply stopped needing it to. Emra kept his stall. He kept his houses and his horses too. The story isn't that he gave everything away and moved into a courtyard of his own, because that would make it a story about possessions, and it was never about possessions. What changed was smaller and harder to see from the outside. He stopped walking the market after closing. He started sitting with his wife in the evenings instead, in a home he finally let himself experience as complete, rather than as a waypoint towards some finer version of itself. And the moral he carried, the one worth carrying with you tonight, is this. The market never closes because it was never designed to. It was built to keep you walking. The only way out was never to reach the end of the row. It was to stop right where you're standing and let yourself notice that you already have what you keep seeking. If this story gave you even a single quiet moment tonight, there are more waiting for you here whenever you need them. Next time, I'll tell you about a king who traded his crown for one night of sleep, and what he asked for in return. Until then, walk gently, hold loosely,